So we're really excited today to have with us Sandy and Liz. They're going to tell you about the great work that they've been doing with ClassACT HR 85 and the Climate Change Action Working Group. So I'm going to hand it over to them to introduce themselves and stop the share, and they'll share their slides.
All right. Thank you, Morgan. I'm Elizabeth Losos, college class of 85. And I am a co-founder of ClassACT HR 85 and really delighted to be here. Sandy will be speaking also in a moment and introduce herself then. I want to, first of all, thank HACE not only for this opportunity to talk with you all today, but a whole bunch of folks involved in HACE have been really pivotal to supporting and helping define this effort. So a big shout out for HACE on this. Sandy, do you want to put up the slides? Okay, so what I want to talk about today, is a project that was started almost 2 years ago by ClassACT HR 85 and our Climate Change Working Group. And we really started after we started thinking about what we should do on climate just at the time that then President Bacow made his big announcement about the endowment and the new vice provost, Jim Stock, and various other climate declarations, which we were really inspired by, but we felt like we wanted to hold Harvard to account that they really stepped up in the way they claimed they were going to. And so we spent the last 2 years thinking about how we would do that, how Harvard could really become the world climate leader that they said they wanted to be. And as I said, it was led by ClassACT HR 85, but over time we've started to bring in more and more alumni groups, and now what we're calling future alumni groups, or in fact current students in this effort. So this now transcends multiple different groups. This is not just ClassACT HR 85, although we are still sort of in the driver's seat of it. And so what I want to do today is share with you a really quick overview of what our initiative is all about. And at the end of it, we will share a link to our slide deck, which will give you many more details, because we're going to sort of only give you the really high level results and what we're trying to do. And so with that, I will say we started, as I said, 2 years ago, and we met very early on with Vice Provost Jim Stock, and he challenged us. He said, tell us, help us figure out what it is that alumni think. And so we went ahead and we developed a survey. And in fact, HACE was a collaborator on this. Many of you may recall getting a request to answer our survey. And briefly, what we found was we looked in two broad areas. One is that indeed, at least the people who answered the survey, overwhelmingly, all the groups, all the individual classes, as well as HACE membership, felt that this should be a priority. Climate should be a priority for Harvard. And if Harvard were to engage, they could make a meaningful impact. And the second broad area we focused on is we asked alumni, so where should Harvard focus? And we essentially came up with 6 different categories that were based on the Project Drawdown model, but we adapted it for a university setting. And we asked respondents where they thought Harvard should prioritize. And the answer was alumni feel that there should be a broad range of impacts, not just in one area. It was, of all the classes and of the HACE membership, climate research did come out on top, followed by policy influence and climate education. A bit below that was what we call the walk the talk, or sort of good housekeeping activities such as emissions reduction on campus and climate-friendly investments. The category that came lowest was stakeholder engagement, primarily really looking particularly at alumni activation, but we also threw a lot of the comments added in the ad hoc categories heard frequently that a lot of respondents really felt that this could be very important, but they didn't rank it high because they felt that Harvard hadn't actually engaged on this. So this too turned out to be one of the areas that there was significant interest in Harvard focusing. And so from the survey, and then from a whole series of focus groups and conversations with our working group, but increasingly with other ClassACTs and HACE and other alumni groups, we came up with what we consider a challenge for Harvard. We feel that Harvard should rise to the challenge of intellectual leadership in climate and sustainability, essentially meet what they have rhetorically said they want to be, a world leader, be on the world stage. And what we are urging Harvard to do, what we have been focusing on, is promoting Harvard to announce and to focus on climate moonshot goals, which would critically be characterized in these areas: breadth. We want goals in each of these 6 areas that I just mentioned, and Sandy will talk about this a bit more. Impact. Each of these goals should be real stretches for Harvard, and they should be measurable, impactful goals. The third is urgency. There should be goals and benchmarks. In the near term, we shouldn't be waiting for 2050 for Harvard to reach some of these goals. Equity in justice. This is not a separate goal. We feel that there should be an equity and justice lens on all 6 of these areas. So equity and justice should be incorporated into climate research, into education, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally, and in some ways, most importantly, transparency and communication. We feel that Harvard should not only set these goals, but announce them publicly and broadly, as well as show accountability in how they're reaching them. Because I think probably everyone here knows that Harvard has this really unique pedestal where what they do resonates around the world. And so by setting these goals and trying to reach them, they not only will be able to have an impact in meeting them, but also challenge other peer universities and other institutions to do the same. So I'm going to hand this over to Sandy to talk about what we spent really much of the last year thinking about. What might these goals look like? We're not saying that these are the exact goals that Harvard has to do. We think that Harvard should bring their A team together to figure out what it should be in each of these, but we've gone ahead and sort of offered up what we think they might look like. So Sandy?
I can't seem to unmute and share. Okay, here we go. Let me redo this again. Sorry. All right, so I'm going to give you the examples of potential moonshots that we came up with, and we really do stress that we want Harvard to have a moonshot mentality, but come up with their own goals. We created these examples with a group of alumni drawn from all different classes, but people with expertise and experience in one or more of these 6 categories. And some of the participants on our moonshot team actually were drawn from the HACE leadership team. The next slide summarizes the 9 moonshot goals that we present to Harvard as examples. I'm going to go through this like in 2 minutes, and normally I take about 10 minutes to go through it. So I apologize if it sounds overwhelming, but I want to encourage that you folks click on a link we're going to drop into chat later for the full presentation, as Liz mentioned, and you can look through the details behind each of these goals. They're very measurable and concrete. They're also organized, as you can see, all 6 categories in priority order that reflects the research findings, our surveys. And the dates also represent the urgency we feel the climate challenge requires of us. So in the area of climate research, we are proposing to Harvard that they really expand the faculty numbers that are focused on climate research and triple the amount of funding that allows those faculty members to do the create the world-changing knowledge that's going to be required to address this crisis. In the policy influence sphere, we want Harvard to really lean in and become much more public-facing in educating and informing policy leaders, and as well as really amplify or add to the number of international policy leaders who are making decisions about climate change. Harvard is in an exceptional position to prepare and generate more leaders in climate policy for the world. Climate education category, we created goals here that really are a follow-on to the report that Harvard generated a year ago on was the state of climate education at Harvard. That report didn't have any firm goals and dates. We proposed some with these moonshot goals. Let's have climate content in every curriculum in the schools at Harvard that align with the mission of the school, including in the college, the undergraduates should have to meet some sort of climate and sustainability literacy requirement to graduate. We also challenge Harvard to create bachelor's and master's programs in climate and sustainability. In the emissions reduction and investment financing category, the walk the talk segments that Liz mentioned, these are really challenging categories for everyone, not just Harvard. They have some great goals established, but for 2050, we are challenging them to pull them into 2036, which is the 400th anniversary for Harvard. So in emissions reduction, we propose that Harvard eliminates GHG emissions in their campus operations, and that for the endowment, they achieve net zero GHG emissions by 2036 instead of 2050. And finally, in terms of stakeholder engagement, we truly believe it's important that by next year, Harvard launch an initiative, a program that starts really getting Harvard interacting with alumni like us. There are 400,000 alumni. Many of them care deeply about climate. Our survey shows that. And let's have Harvard work with alumni so that collectively we can have a greater impact on the climate crisis. Now, when we have meetings with Harvard administrators, and we've had 6 so far, great meetings, 2 of them with Salada, 1 of them with the Office of Sustainability, and others such as with Harvard Corporation fellows, we get very positive response about the initiative. They get very interested when we talk about the untapped potential of alumni, but they do ask, well, what do you mean by alumni activation? What we'd like your help in answering that question. We have some ideas, but we want to get a poll going, and maybe I'll stop share here so that we can initiate the poll. And Liz, if you could do that. We have a poll with 5 different types of actions Harvard could take that would constitute alumni activation. And we'd like you to rank from 1 to 5 your preference on these actions. We're gonna do this for 1 minute. I'm gonna be quiet for about 30 seconds so you folks can concentrate and do this. And we'll look at the results after everyone has finished. Okay, we're about halfway through the minute. I want to make sure you know that if you have other ideas after the poll ends, please feel free to drop those ideas in the chat. They will be saved and read. I'm also going to be sharing a link to a Google form that will be collecting ideas about alumni activation from any of you, even after the meeting, so that if you come up with a brilliant concept, maybe, tomorrow. Sorry, that's my timer going off. Can you stop the poll, Liz? Okay. And is there a summary of results maybe we could find? We had 33 respondents. Is that what happened?
Can you see the results? I can't see them from my screen.
I am also trying to figure that out.
Well,
Danny,
I
we
don't know
might
if
need.
I, as the Zoom host, am the only one who can see them, but I can see the results, and it looks like I'll screenshot this and pass them along, and then if you didn't get the opportunity to put your preference in the Zoom chat, I'm sure Sandy and Liz will have a follow-up mechanism as they'll share in the chat for you to express your input. But it looks
Okay.
like kind of ranked order of these 5, with the most preferred going down through a mix. It was E, Harvard creates opportunities for alumni to connect with each other, followed by Harvard makes it easier for alumni to direct their donations. Harvard leverages alumni expertise for guidance. Harvard provides alumni education, and then Harvard recruits alumni to mentor students.
That's great.
Oh,
This is the
great.
kind of
And
dated.
it looks like everyone can see the results. So perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danny. Thanks so much for summarizing that. Okay. I want to just wrap up our presentation with a couple of other thoughts on how you can help us keep the momentum going on this initiative. We have a couple of requests for people who want to help. First of all, in our conversations with Harvard leaders, it's become very clear that they are so decentralized as an organization. It makes some of the schools, the world leaders. They really focus on what they do well, but it makes it hard for groups like Salata and the Office of Sustainability to try to get Harvard to go in one direction on challenges like climate. What would really help is when alumni from different schools also communicate directly to their schools that it's important for greater climate action to occur, because the schools have a lot of independence and authority and how much resources are applied on climate action. So if you're an alum of the medical school, the extension school, the law school, please take the effort to to communicate to the administration at those schools about how important it is to you that climate action be a priority. We also would like to ask that if you are members of other Harvard alumni groups, other affiliations, whether they're other SIGs or clubs or social groups, that you consider advocating for them to join or support this initiative. One of the first things we do when we go in and have a meeting with Harvard administrators is to emphasize we are not coming in just as ClassACT HR 85, but we're coming in on behalf of many Harvard alums very concerned about how Harvard is dealing with the climate crisis. And so we're intending to add to this list. The future alumni group, as Liz mentioned, will list the current student groups that are interested in supporting us, and that will get added as well. So we will drop into the link after I stop sharing. I'll drop into the chat links to our presentation in full, also the Google form, so that you can add more ideas as well as use our presentation when you're advocating for this initiative. So thank you so much, and we'll turn it over to Eleanor, I think, to lead some Q&A.
Thank you. So we are a little behind on schedule, so I'd like to just surface one or two questions. If anybody has a question that they'd like to put into the chat. But I have one question while we're waiting for that, which is, what have you learned that you would call best practices for how to navigate within the fragmented Harvard environment? What is important?
I will start on that. I would say very quickly, two key points. One is Harvard is, for a university, very decentralized, and each school has a lot of their own authority. And so not only do we need to convince the president and Harvard Corporation, et cetera, but we need to actually have support within each of the schools. And that's why HACE, with its membership across so many schools and programs, is very well positioned for that. The second thing, well, actually three things. The second thing that I learned is how powerful Harvard Corporation is in determining issues like what Harvard does in terms of climate, probably even more so than the Board of Trustees, which I was unaware of before then. And then the final thing that we have found when we've had these meetings, particularly with Harvard administrators, is if we come in not demanding that Harvard do X, Y, or Z, but telling Harvard we want to work with them to be able to reach X, Y, or Z. So not coming in so adversarial that it looks like we're just trying to pound on Harvard, but we're trying to sort of help Harvard do what they say they want to do. That kind of non-aggressive tone has worked very well and has opened a lot of doors for us, we feel. Sandy, did I miss anything?
No, you got them perfectly. I would just add that because of that approach we've had, we believe that at this point, Salata Institute and the Office of Sustainability really considers alumni as potential advocates for their effort and support allies. We're not adversaries. And so we want to keep building on that.
Great, great. Well, thank you both very, very much. We've got a lot of great response in the meeting chat and some follow-up links and things like that are there for everybody to look at the presentations and to communicate directly with Sandy and Liz.